Their patterns of behavior. That's another, at a micro level. You know, I showed you that sort of hierarchy of value / frames of references that ranged from micro behaviors up to high order abstractions. You can extract out personality by looking at people's micro actions as well. And one of the papers that I want you guys to read that's on the course website has to do with our investigation into behavioral markers of the big 5 traits. Yep.
What defines introversion? Is it simply the lack of extroversion?
Maybe. We don't know exactly. I'll get back to that. At the moment, that's kind of what it looks like, is that introversion is something like the absence of extroversion. But let me explain extroversion more particularly. It'll make more sense. Okay. All right. So you can think about them as stable motivations. So for example, people who are high in agreeableness, I can generally tell people who are high in agreeableness when they come into my clinical practice and I start asking them about their biography. Because my experience has been that people who are agreeable will tell you their biography defined by relationships they've had over their life. So agreeable people are high in compassion and high in politeness. It looks like the maternal dimension. It looks like the pair bonding dimension, something like that. And so agreeable people tend to characterize their lives in terms of the intimate relationships they've had. And so those are also people who would value an intimate relationship over anything else, if agreeableness is the uppermost trait that characterizes their personality. Then, well, systems of values, we already talked about that a little bit. The higher you are in a given trait, the more you value certain opportunities that are associated with that trait. And so I think it's worthwhile thinking about traits along using all of those different conceptual schemes to understand what constitutes a trait. But what people are, in some sense, is a little melody of traits. Melody, not M-A-L-A-D-Y, although some people are like that, but melody like a song, you know, where different amounts of each of the canonical traits operate to a different degree in each person, and the person that manifests themselves is the panoply of those traits as they manifest themselves in the world. And so it's actually very useful to understand your big 5 traits as far as I'm concerned. Actually, that's why I have you do that exercise that you're supposed to do for this class that helps you identify your faults and virtues. And I used big 5 terminology to help you do that. So part of the reason it's useful to know what your traits are is because it can help you figure out how you should orient your life. Like, so for example, if you're high in extroversion, you know, you've got a proclivity towards sales, for example, and you're going to like occupations where you have a lot of opportunity for social interactions and social networking. You're not going to be happy if your job requires you to sit alone for extended periods of time and work in the absence of social interaction. You're going to be one of those annoying people then in one of those offices that instead of sitting alone in their office is going from doorway to doorway, engaging everyone in conversation, right? So, and you want to be in a position that capitalizes on your traits because it's really difficult to work contrary to your traits. The other thing that's worth thinking about too, we're actually building a computer app for this, which has been about 80% done for a whole year. We've got a hypothesis that we're still working out that's supported to some degree by the relevant literature. So imagine that you're looking for a stable partner, right? So you might think, well, what do you want in a stable partner? And at least in principle, one of the things you don't want is too much mismatch between you and that person on the 5 fundamental dimensions. So for example, if you're really extroverted and you have a really introverted partner, you're going to engage in continual conflict about how much social activity the two of you should subject yourself to. And it's very, very difficult for people who widely differ on those dimensions to come to consensus, because it's not just a matter of opinion, right? It's really a matter of different, if you're looking at extremes, of really different types of people. And the thing about introverts is they just don't enjoy large-scale social interaction that much. One-on-one, they're often fine, but in a group, they don't like that, and it tires them out. Whereas a real extrovert, it's like you isolate them, and they just wither on the vine, because a huge part of what actually motivates them in a positive way is tangled up with social interaction. And so if you're an agreeable person and you have a particularly disagreeable partner, you're also going to run into problems, because the agreeable person will say whatever you want, whenever, and the disagreeable person will say, well, I'd like to know what the hell you want for a change, and be much more harsh and much more demanding in the situation. And the agreeable person is going to find the disagreeable person harsh and unpleasant, and the disagreeable person is going to find the agreeable person wishy-washy and unable to stand up for themselves. And again, that's actually one of the primary sources of tension between men and women, because women tend to be higher in agreeableness than men. It's about half a standard deviation, which is quite a large difference by psychological